Number 10. The opening. The opening scene in and of itself sets a completely different tone for the film. I am trying to do this list, as I said, without any major spoilers, but I will say what goes on there really leads into the rest of the story a lot more cohesively and makes it feel like straight out of the gate the stakes are just higher in comparison to the original cut of the film. It's a reminder of what we've lost and a warning of the darkness to come, instead of starting with an idea of lost hope like the original film did, with, you know, that shaky video of Superman and those kids. Oh my. This version hints more darkly at what we have left to lose, focusing on that danger and the shift into the preparation to fight against incoming enemies. The entire tone of the film, to be honest, just feels more dark and more desperate, and when we are dealing with an incoming threat so great, it just seems to fit a lot better with the story being told. Number 9. The aspect ratio. Even down to the visuals, the Snyder Cut version of Justice League is very different in comparison to the initial release of the film. Snyder himself became a fan of the full-frame look while shooting certain scenes for Batman vs Superman in this ratio for IMAX, and it seems this love has carried on over to the Snyder Cut, which will make use of the same ratio of 1.33 to 1 as opposed to the initial 1.66 to 1 aspect ratio. Number 8. Superman's black suit. Zack Snyder's Justice League was meant to have a darker tone initially, which is what we see it return to here, giving us a less saturated and kind of more macabre look for the whole film. Adding to this is a suit we have long been hoping to see make its way into the films: Superman's black suit. Superman's black suit is inspired by the Death of Superman storyline, which makes sense here given that we saw Superman defeated at the hands of Doomsday previous to Justice League. Not only does it give Superman a darker look when he returns from the dead, but it also serves a purpose in the comics, as it helps Superman to bolster his strength by absorbing more solar energy, hence why it's, you know, a dark suit. Number 7. Vulko's introduction. Initially there were a few characters we were meant to meet prior to Aquaman in Justice League, but some of these appearances were cut down and some were cut entirely. Vulko was one such appearance that got cut. Quick refresh, Vulko is the chief counselor to the throne in Atlantis, but also in secret mentors Arthur Curry, preparing him to ascend to the throne as is his birthright. Vulko in the DCEU is played by Willem Dafoe, and any film that gives me more Willem Dafoe is alright in my books. I really loved him as Vulko, and I think the prior introduction to the character before Aquaman makes a lot of sense. Granted, now it's after Aquaman, but still, it was a good idea, especially considering how dense Aquaman is when it comes to introducing us to new characters and of course a whole political climate besides. The intro scene with him additionally grants us extra insight into Aquaman's character, developing him in a way that allows us to understand him and his struggles a lot more clearly in comparison to the original release of Justice League. Aquaman as a film had a lot of exposition heavy lifting to do, so having Vulko in Justice League was evidently meant to ease us into the whole world a bit more gently, and for that, it really works. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are enjoying this list and you want to hear us talk more about the Snyder Cut, because trust me, I got a lot more to say, feel free to give this video a thumbs up. Let us know that you like it. Number 6. The Joker. I mean, I feel like I could just do a whole list on all the character changes and additions that were made to the Snyder Cut Justice League versus the original theatrical release. There are just so many. The Joker is just one of the many additional characters who appears in this version of the film, but who did not make any appearance in the original. Snyder said that he had plans for an interaction between Batman and Joker down the line, and to honor both portrayals of these characters, he wanted to give the iconic villain and hero duo a chance to share at least one scene together. Which means, yes, we get to see the return of Jared Leto's Joker, spouting lines of meme fame and sporting an entirely different look. So not quite the same one that you saw in Suicide Squad, my friends. Number 5. Batman uses guns? In the nightmare reality at least. This is the reality where the aforementioned scene between Joker and Batman takes place, and it was hinted at we'd even learn the meaning behind the Joker card that Batman kept on his gun. Here Batman and Joker are less rivals and more colleagues in the dystopian future where Superman ends up joining Darkseid and the world is basically like a Mad Max inspired dusty hell landscape. In this reality, which was also shown in Batman's visions in Batman v Superman, we additionally see Batman wielding guns. Very shocking in comparison to what we saw in the original Justice League, where we didn't even get a glimpse of the nightmare reality at all, and maybe shocking as well for those who think of Batman as exclusively anti-gun or, anti-killing, despite his original, much darker origins in the comics. If you're shocked by him using guns, you should go back a bit in the comics, because that's a thing. It happened. Number 4. Darkseid. Darkseid was originally intended to be the main villain for the Justice League film, but kinda ended up on the cutting room floor when Joss Whedon took over. But Darkseid is back, baby, in the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. Oh boy! Returning as the big bad Snyder had always intended him to be. I think Darkseid has been the change most fans have been excited to see, as Steppenwolf never really felt like an epic enough foe in comparison. And it also felt like instead we were getting a Darkseid tease, which of course never really amounted to anything, as Justice League was the film that pretty much killed the franchise, or at least splintered it into like 1,000 separate worlds and pieces. Number 3. Revamped Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf had an interesting look in the first Justice League, and now he's back with a different but kinda equally interesting look. I do like his armor though, I gotta say. It's very sharp and shiny. And of course, we still get a decent look at Steppenwolf's beautiful face, albeit a little bit less of it. Here, Steppenwolf also seems to have less of a nose, and is it weird that I've also observed that he seems to have a smaller waist? Am I the only one that noticed that? Or maybe it's just his new, more figure-flattering armor making it appear that way to me. I do like the new design of his armor quite a bit, as it makes him look far more deadly and monstrous, and the way he uses it in battle, it's beautiful, giving him just this more foreboding presence that he deserves. It also sounds as though they made some changes to Steppenwolf's voice as well. Obviously it's still Kieran Hines' voice, but they made him sound a little more demonic, more gravelly, and with a little more of a darker resonance in his voice. He just overall feels more intimidating in this version of the film. Number 2. Cyborg's Redemption. Wow, okay, so I loved this deep exploration of Cyborg, aka Vic Stone's character, so much more than the original. We get to learn a lot more about Cyborg and his past this time around. And no spoilers, but you might want to have some tissues at the ready, as it gets emotional at parts. I was crying, it's so good. We get to learn not just about Vic's past, but also about his potential future, as we see just how great his power and thus his responsibility is. I also love that we get some hero moments with Cyborg, like, thank you. There is so much missing from the first film when it comes to our understanding of Vic Stone, and the Zack Snyder Cut does a great job of filling in these missing pieces and establishing the character as the powerhouse that fans know and expect him to be when it comes to his live action film adaptation. Just, if you love Cyborg, you need to watch this cut. I'm just saying, if you're a Cyborg fan, you gotta watch this, it's so good. Number 1. The runtime. Initially, when Zack Snyder showed off his then seemingly mythical version of the film, we weren't sure at the point, does it exist, does it not, which was pictured in a film canister, we were led to believe it had a 214-minute runtime, and would stay that way, because we're like, well, it's there, it exists, it's probably not gonna get touched a lot. However, our previously fabled cut was then greenlit to become a released reality, and it wasn't just slated to be released as is. Oh no. Snyder had more to say and more to add, and so reshoots began and scenes were added in, and you can definitely tell they had a lot of extra footage, I think, as well, giving us an added 28 minutes total of footage from that initial estimated 214-minute runtime. Now, compared to the original Justice League film, Zack Snyder's version is double the length. Double the length. Film. We're talking about films, friends. Get your minds out of the gutter. With Justice League having a runtime of 2 hours and Zack Snyder's cut coming in at just over 4 hours. 4 hours and 2 minutes, I believe, to be exact. So make sure you are well hydrated, you're comfy, you're cozy, you got maybe some blankets, and you have lots of snacks ready before you hit that play button. And maybe get up to do, I don't know, a bit of stretching somewhere in the middle, because yeah, 4 hours is a long time. We'd be talking about multiple VHSs in the 90s, by the way. I still have a copy of Titanic that's 2 VHSs, I remember. But when it comes to that 4-hour runtime, I do think this film earns it. Number 10. Granny Goodness cameo? I mean, I was already psyched that we were getting Darkseid, but a nod towards Granny Goodness as well. too good to be true. However, Granny Goodness does make an appearance in this version of the film, and it's rumored that she was actually based on a special effects team member's grandmother. Her appearance is in stark contrast to the original Justice League film, which features Steppenwolf as the main antagonist, with no other real hints of Darkseid's presence or of his powerful Furies, whom Granny Goodness is known for recruiting and training. It's cool to see such a powerful ally of Darkseid make an appearance here, albeit a brief one, especially someone as epic as Granny Goodness. Number 9. Wonder Woman's fight scene. While Wonder Woman takes on the men who are attempting to set off a bomb in a bank that will impact the surrounding area with its blast, the whole fight gets a completely different feel. And while this film admittedly is a lot more slow-mo than the original, and I don't know if we need all the slow-mo used in this fight seems to earn its existence, as all these moments highlight just how fast Wonder Woman is moving. I loved how much more powerful and fierce Diana appears here, as she also straight up kills her enemies as well. I love all the raw, suspenseful, and brutal moments that were built into this fight, and the added moment when Wonder Woman headbutts Superman upon his resurrection. Not in the fight that I was just talking about, but that moment is really good. Basically, just Wonder Woman fighting in this feels better. Number 8. Amazon's fight scene. Another fight scene that feels completely different. The fight scene with the Amazons where Steppenwolf fights them for the Mother Box feels more desperate and stakes amazingly raised, as we get to watch Hippolyta mourn each of her fallen warriors. After all, there are only so many Amazons on Themyscira. While they may have an exceedingly long lifespan and be extremely tough and skilled, they can still be killed by enemies, which is exactly what happens here. I love the moment where you watch as the once open vault for the Mother Box was sealed off, and then during the seismic activity of that fight crumbles and tumbles down into the sea. It's a huge moment where we get to see Hippolyta's grief before being thrown back into the fray once more. Even Steppenwolf's final words feel more powerful, where instead of promising that Hippolyta and all of the Amazons will love him, he terrorizes her, reminding her that she cannot stop what is coming and that she cannot save her warriors and her people from the inevitable darkness that will rain down upon them. Hey friends, before we move on to this next point, just a reminder, if you're loving this video and if you're enjoying the content on the channel, be sure to show that love by giving this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring the bell, all those things really do help us out, and thank you for doing them. Number 7. Soundtrack. While I wasn't a huge fan of every change up here when it came to the score and the soundtrack, it should be noted there are massive differences in comparison to the original. There are songs and scores that are added in for extra scenes, as well as swaps of songs here and there that bring with them a much more dreary and ominous tone that matches what Snyder is trying to do here, with much of his slow motion shots and darker, often more grittier and grounded visuals. There are even song changes in this soundtrack that I was like, man, I really thought that was a Snyder pick, but I guess not, because the song is different for this scene. Number 6. Desaad. The inclusion of Desaad and how he is used here drastically changes the story, especially for the character of Steppenwolf, where in the first film Steppenwolf was just a villain who seemed to, I don't know, want to do bad things because I guess it was fun, and because he had a bit of a hurt ego after being defeated like a millennia ago. Here we see through the relationship between him and Desaad that he really just wants to go home. He seeks approval from Darkseid and for his great lord and his god to accept him back into the family, so to speak, so that he might return to Apocalypse. Not only do we get the intimidating figure of Desaad's inclusion to help do this, but it also gives us another antagonist to be frightened of, like a future antagonist. Where Steppenwolf is intimidating, Desaad, while distant, feels doubly so, and there is this implication that if Desaad came to Earth in Steppenwolf's place, we likely would be even more terrified of him. And you know, after the end of this movie you're kind of like, oh, so like Darkseid, Desaad, Granny Goodness, they'd all be coming over. So yeah, I don't know, that's what I think. Number 5. Iris West. We get a whole scene introducing Iris West, everyone, and not only that, but it also introduces us to Barry Allen's The Flash a bit more as well, and establishes what his powers allow him to do. The scene with Iris West also establishes Barry as an inherent hero, someone who sees danger and runs into it, not away from it, which is, I think, very different from the theatrical release. Something we lost in that original release when Flash's youth and his inexperience were more highlighted than his capability as a hero. Now, we do need to talk about a pretty creepy moment that we got when Barry saves Iris, and after just seeing her, not really even formally meeting her. The two haven't even had a conversation yet, let's just acknowledge, and he decides it's fine to touch her hair while saving her life. He like moves her hair out of the way so he can look at her beautiful face, and like, her face is beautiful, but this is pretty creepy. I will acknowledge that the first time that I watched this, I didn't notice how creepy it was. I feel like the music distracted me, but when I rewatched it again, I was like, this moment feels weird. So yeah, that was creepy and is a moment in the future that we should probably be more mindful of. However, I am happy that Iris got introduced in this film, and aside from the creepy stuff, I did enjoy the sequence that introduces her, aside from the hair. Just creepy. I also really loved her convertible, I gotta say. I mourned that vehicle when it exploded. I was like, no, no. Her poor convertible. Number 4, Martian Manhunter. Martian Manhunter was actually included in the Zack Snyder cut of the film. We got to see him disguised as Martha Manhunter if you will, giving a pep talk to Lois about how valuable and important she is. And we also saw Martian Manhunter during the epilogue, where he warns Bruce about the apocalyptic reality that will come to pass should Darkseid find the anti-life equation before the Justice League does. With Wonder Woman also mentioning that they could use more chairs at their headquarters, which is being set up to be in the old rundown Wayne Manor at the end of the movie. It's implied that Martian Manhunter could even, like in the comics, find his own place on the team in the future phrase to come. I loved his inclusion, and it just makes me want a Martian Manhunter movie all its own, where we actually get to find out what Martian Manhunter was up to on Earth until he decided to reveal himself at that moment. I just want to know, like, why did he choose that moment? What was going on for him? I have a lot of awesome Martian Manhunter questions. Please answer them. Number 3, Lois Lane is pregnant. In this version of the film, we also find out that Lois Lane is pregnant. Well, it's heavily implied in the cut, with Lois grabbing a pregnancy test from a tableside drawer in her apartment. We also get a more direct acknowledgement of her condition at the end of the film. While helping Clark and Lois move back into their farmhouse in Kansas, Bruce congratulates Lois, and we see her holding what appears to be a baby carrier. Definitely a confirmation that Lois and Clark are expecting. We also know from this cut that Lois will be the key, implying that the Nightmareverse comes to pass as well after perhaps a Injustice-like event where Lois and potentially Clark's unborn child end up dead, causing him to give into the anti-life equation and join Darkseid's ranks. Although I kind of hope this isn't Lois's only importance in this bleak alternate reality, and that there's some other purpose for her than baby mama and, you know, love of Superman's life that she also serves. I feel like if it's just that, I'm gonna be a little like, but is that it? Really? Okay. Number 2, the Atom tease. At the end of the film, we get a tease for the inclusion of another important superhero character who could also join the Justice League, Ryan Choi's Atom. It is mentioned that Dr. Choi is the head of nanotechnology at Star Labs, and that it's a scientific field that he is the master in. This is an important detail, as the Atom's powers allow him to shrink down to subatomic size and mass, or to increase his size and mass exponentially so that he towers like 100 feet or more above his opponents. In other words, his powers are very similar to the MCU's Ant-Man, although Ryan Choi's Atom in the comics and in the DCEU, instead of being a wily and skilled thief, is a brilliant scientist and genius. Ryan Choi was the second hero to take up the mantle of Atom after Ray Palmer in the comics, who happens to have been his mentor as well. Number 1, time travel. Another huge moment here in the DCEU was when Flash's ability to time travel was acknowledged and revealed to us. In the end, it's all up to the world's fastest hero to save the day by turning back the clock on Steppenwolf's would-be victory. We also get a hint earlier on in the film that time travel is something that is possible, and that Barry can actually time travel by using the Speed Force. When the Mother Box is about to hit the water and Barry needs to give it a charge with his Speed Force energy to activate it, it's shown that he arrives a few seconds too late, and rather than just trying again here, he chooses to rewind time a few seconds seconds so that he can make contact with the mother box at the right time. Time travel being introduced is a huge thing overall in terms of world and story building for Snyder's vision, and it also gives Barry a lot more importance in that final fight. For those of you who have watched the cut and the original theatrical release as well, you will notice that we got a bit extra in this version via reshoots in Snyder's cut of the film, whereas in Joss Whedon's theatrical cut of Justice League, we instead got a modified version of Snyder's intended mid-credits scene with Lex Luthor and Deathstroke meeting on Lex's yacht. Although the epilogue starts well before our jump to the Nightmareverse, this sequence was what Snyder had intended for his post-credits, or something like it anyways, as most of the scene was shot with the actors not necessarily even being on set together, so keep that in mind when you're watching it. And so because this was the intended post-credit scene for Snyder's cut, this is the part of the epilogue we will be focusing on here. Everything that comes following the end of the scene on the yacht. It starts with a hard cut to the Nightmareverse, which is very smoky. Apparently the Nightmareverse, there's a lot of smoke there. We also see parademons, lots of parademons, and ships soaring through the sky, and what appears to be a charred, hazy city skyline on the horizon. Batman appears along with his ragtag team of survivors. Alongside him is Deathstroke, Cyborg, Queen Mara, and The Flash. But we also learn that there is another person here who is joining up with Batman's motley crew. It's his nemesis, the Joker. How did these people come together, and why are they the ones left standing? We're not really sure, but we can ponder on it. The last we saw of Mara was in Aquaman when she was gearing up to rule Atlantis alongside Arthur Curry, who was finally getting more involved in the politics. Here it seems the Darkseid has killed Arthur Curry, or had him killed, though when we saw Cyborg's vision of this reality earlier on in the film, Darkseid is the one shown doing the deed himself, spearing Aquaman in the chest with his own trident and firing his Omega beams at him. And so it makes sense that Mara, after somehow surviving the attack, perhaps Aquaman even sacrificed himself to give her enough time to escape, is hell-bent on getting revenge on those who took Arthur from her. In fact, I think she's even wielding his trident, which, if he was killed with it, I don't know how she ended up getting it, but maybe later it was just lying around. I don't know. But yeah, she's got a trident, so I think it's his. The last we saw of Barry Allen's Flash, he was happily speeding through the streets and was on his way to working as a forensic investigator to hopefully find evidence that would be used to exonerate his father of the charges that were laid against him. He was a hero who was also working on his own important mission. Obviously, his speed powers later came in handy when Darkseid arrived and took over the Earth, transforming it into a hellish landscape. But what happened to his suit? He seems to be sporting something a little more rough looking here in comparison to the suit that we saw earlier in the film, although it should be noted you can still make out the lightning bolt on this suit. So this suit, although it looks a little worse for wear, could actually be some kind of upgrade, which maybe makes it easier for Barry to harness the Speed Force. I don't know. The overall shape of his suit is also very similar to the original one we saw in the film, although the pieces and the plates that make it up look different, and even kind of have a little bit of a different shape or composition to them. But the overall look of the suit is pretty matchy-matchy. Cyborg, last time we saw him, was visiting his mother's grave before blasting off to go do hero things. Yay! Implying that he is now part of the Justice League at the end of the film. Like everyone else, obviously. I also love when we get that shot of them just all standing together and you're like, yeah, Justice League baby. In the Nightmareverse, Cyborg seems to have gained a cape, probably to help cut the costs on the CG work that needed to be done to have him in this scene. As you'll notice, we really only get like one full shot of him in all of his cyborg glory. It's likely that Batman and Cyborg and Flash may have happened to be in the final fight together, but were a few of the Justice League members to come out with their will and their lives intact. Perhaps Cyborg's premonition helped to give him the wherewithal to know what was coming, and how to avoid being killed in that final fight. Earlier on in the film, when interacting with the Mother Box and alien tech on the Kryptonian ship, Cyborg also learns of the potential fate of the other heroes. We see, for example, that Diana does not make it in the Nightmareverse, being killed at some point along with Aquaman. Perhaps it was Aquaman and Wonder Woman being separated from the rest of the League that made them more vulnerable when Darkseid attacked. We don't see how Diana died, but we do see her funeral pyre with the Amazons all in attendance, mourning the loss of one of their greatest warriors and their princess. Deathstroke, who also appears in the group, was last seen in that intended mid-credits scene where it was implied that he'd be hunting down Batman for Lex Luthor, but also doing the job pro bono, as he has his own score to settle with the hero. Deathstroke is then given intel by Lex that Batman is Bruce Wayne, and the two celebrate. It is possible Deathstroke was hunting down Batman when this all took place, and was kind of forced to team up with the surviving heroes in order to survive Darkseid himself. Joker is a little more tricky, as we really haven't seen that much of him in this whole universe, and this version is also very different from the version of him that we saw in Suicide Squad. So yeah, somehow all his tattoos seem to have disappeared, and his hair is like longer and loose, and his makeup is much more messy and smudged. He's wearing a SWAT vest, implying that he potentially escaped police custody perhaps at the time of the invasion, or perhaps he was just reveling in the chaos and he looted it off of a corpse, who knows. He also decides to team up with Batman here, which brings us to our next bit of analysis, the conversation between these two. There are a lot of things that are brought up and hinted at in this conversation in relation to the events that happen in the world and the relationship between the hero and the villain. One, we learn that Joker knows that Batman is Bruce Wayne, as he calls him Bruce constantly throughout the conversation, and we are once again reminded of all the people Batman has lost, his parents, but more importantly, his sidekick Robin, who died at the hands of Joker. Joker even considers Batman more responsible for Robin's death, it seems. After forging their truce, he reminds Batman that he can tear up the peace offering, a Joker card, that he was given at any point if he wants to discuss why he sent his boy Wonder to do a man's job, implying that Batman sent Robin on a solo mission to pursue Joker when he died. Or, more likely in my opinion, Robin broke away from Batman to pursue Joker against Bruce's recommendations, which, you know, seems equally likely to me, but take it as you will. There's also a kind of startling moment where we get a little flirty comment from Jared Leto's Joker in regards to how exactly Joker can be of service to Batman. I'm not going to repeat that line, but it's in there if you want to go and find it again. I'll just let you do that. We don't have to board the Batman Joker ship, by the way, but we do need to acknowledge that there is that, with that very bold question that Joker poses to Batman. We don't have to get on that ship, but we can see the ship in the distance. The Batman Joker ship, an unexpected romance. As I said earlier, Joker offers Batman a truce, symbolized by the Joker card that Batman receives. As long as he has that card in one piece, their truce will stand. And this truce apparently exists because Batman needs Joker for something? Though what is not really specified. So we know that Batman has a plan, and the Joker must be an integral part of it, but just what he brings to the table remains to be seen. Joker is a special brand of crazy and is often shown to be ruthless, but he doesn't have any superpowers. Perhaps there is an item or knowledge the Joker possesses, or knows of at least, that Batman and his team need. All we know is Batman needs him in order to help undo the events that led to the creation of the Nightmareverse. So maybe he has intel that they need, and they're gonna try to send Barry back in time? Still, we also know that Batman is willing to throw this truce aside as soon as Joker is no longer needed, because he threatens to kill him. And he even reveals that Harley Quinn died in his arms, making him promise that when he does kill the Joker, that he will do so slowly for her. This almost breaks the Joker for a moment, leaving him shaking momentarily, literally shaking, before he begins to laugh and compliments Batman on his good joke. We also learn in this conversation that Lois Lane's death could have been prevented by Batman, but instead of sacrificing himself to save her, he let her die, which is how this world came to be. All of this ties back to what the films have been hinting at, that Lois is the key, and that protecting her life, and perhaps the life of her unborn child as well, prevents the Nightmareverse from becoming a reality. Though her exact importance is not really mentioned here at this point, it seems to be less about her amazing journalism skills and more about her importance to Superman and her role as a future mother. Going back to Cyborg's vision, we see that Superman gives in to Darkseid and succumbs to his influence, and likely that of the anti-life equation following the death of someone he loves. While the body is charred beyond recognition, so we can't really tell who it is, many of us assume that this is meant to be Lois Lane. Her body being burnt to a crisp also fits in well with what the Joker says about her suffering so. Because yeah, I feel like if you're burnt alive, that's a pretty bad way to go. Like in the film, when we got a brief mention of the multiverse, Joker also acknowledges the possibility of multiple realities, as he wonders how many alternate timelines Batman has destroyed because he isn't willing to sacrifice his own life. Wherever Batman and his team are coming from, it looks as though they may be heading towards Metropolis, just based on the skyline that we cut to following the end of this conversation. It looks like Metropolis to me, at least. Deathstroke asks where they are heading, and Batman doesn't answer, but he does say they're going somewhere that their enemy would never suspect. Now, I feel like Darkseid would probably be surprised if they headed to face him straight on, so perhaps that is their plan. After all, Darkseid has all the power right now, so that would seem a foolish plan to him, I am sure. The other alternative is that maybe Bruce is referring to the fact that they're going to try to time travel, because obviously you'd never expect someone to pop up, in the past. Because time travel. It's not a thing we normally expect, is it? Cyborg then reveals to the group that Superman has found them. We see him land, his eyes glowing red as Batman's team prepares to fight. It's then that Bruce Wayne wakes from his nightmare premonition, bolting up in his bed. We hear almost what sounds like an explosion in the background, one that seems to echo the one from his dream. But of course the reality he returns to belongs in the present day and seems safe and normal. And we see Bruce getting up and walking through his lake house, his lone little lake house. As Bruce heads outside, Martian Manhunter is shown flying down to meet him. He warns Bruce of an oncoming war, how Darkseid will return and seek out the anti-life equation here on Earth, and how they must get to it before he does. He shares that he realized he had a stake in this world and so decided to reveal himself now. Though we don't really know why he decided to stay hidden for so long and what exactly he was up to before, this seems to imply that Martian Manhunter has been in the wings, just keeping an eye on events as they came to pass, but has now been inspired to join the fight by the appearance of the Justice League. He offers his own help and Bruce Wayne seems to accept him, which could mean that we would have actually seen him join the Justice League in the future, especially as Martian Manhunter congratulates Bruce on bringing Earth's defenders together, and then also shares that his parents would be proud of him. Which is a little stalkery to say, but also reveals just how carefully Martian Manhunter has been watching Bruce Wayne and following his story. Finally, he introduces himself to Bruce as Martian Manhunter and says that he'll be in touch before soaring off. The shot pulls out to show Bruce's lonely lake house and in the far distance what appears to be the Gotham City skyline, seemingly safe for now.
Number 10. Pregnant Lois. Okay, so one of the biggest reveals in this cut of the Justice League has to be when Lois grabs her press pass from the table next to her bed and we can see a pregnancy test. And Lois gives it a look, like a look kind of look, not like a, oh nice. No, she gives it like a, oh, I'm gonna see you soon, I'm thinking about you all day kind of look. So in an interview with Esquire, Snyder was asked about that test and he confirms that she's definitely pregnant. Not just pregnant, definitely pregnant. So that's not all. Snyder's plan was actually that after the Justice League 3, it would be 20 years in the future and Superman and Lois' son would be Bruce Kent, the new Batman. So that's okay, Justice League 3 and then Batman, that's 4 movies now that we're on. This is crazy. He doesn't have any powers, says Snyder, but he was going to become the new Batman. Sweet. So on the anniversary of Batman's death, they would have taken young Bruce Kent down to the Batcave and say, oh, your Uncle Bruce would have been proud that you did this. Uncle Bruce, how amazing. So yeah, that meant at one point Batman bit the bullet somewhere in Justice League 2 or 3, but Superman told Batman to protect Lois while he fought Darkseid, but Batman failed to do so and Lois ended up biting the bullet as well. So Superman gets the anti-life equation and then life turns into the one we see in the nightmare sequence. So they were going through time, there was an evil Superman at one point, there's a kid, Flash has to go back in time and change that from happening. We would have gotten 4 movies, it would have been sick. Number 9, Jimmy Olsen. The actor Mark McClure played Jimmy Olsen in the Christopher Reeve movies and in the 1984 Supergirl spin-off. And he was also in the Snyder Cut, believe it or not. Yeah, he's a little older, but still a handsome chap nonetheless. He was the Metropolis police officer that Cyborg saves when a car gets launched in his direction. Now this scene was first in trailers for the movie, but when it came out, like most of the movie, it didn't make the cut. And McClure ended up playing a different cameo in Whedon's cut by the time it hit the theaters. He played a guard at the prison Barry Allen's dad is being held at. But alas, in the Snyder Cut, we see McClure back in his original cameo that we saw teased during the first trailer. Number 8, Ryan Choi. One of the new additions to the cast is Zhang Kai, who plays a character named Ryan Choi, aka the Atom. He made his first debut in comics with Brave New World issue 1. He was Ray Palmer's successor. So he could shrink down really small, and he's the 4th person to take on this mantle actually. So Snyder has confirmed that there was a plan originally to give Atom a spin-off movie that took place in China. Now it's revealed at the end of the movie that he's an expert in nanotechnology. So if these crazy sequels did happen and Batman bit the bullet, he could be the new tech guy perhaps. I mean, anything is possible in this Snyderverse if it did come. Number 7. Iris West. Another amazing addition to the Snyder Cut was Kiersey Clemons. She made her debut as Iris West, and it's been announced that she's on board to reprise her role in a future Flash movie. Now, we got a deleted scene with her back in 2017 with the first Justice League attempt, but when Joss Whedon was called in to finish the movie, she wasn't called in to go back and film anything else. But now we finally get to see that amazing scene, but this time around with more hot dogs. I like how they have a moment too where she fully sees him and then he zips away. Like secret identity, locked in, you saved my life, now you're gone. I'm gonna remember you forever. See you in a few movies. That was one of my favorite scenes in the movie, when he puts the hot dog in his pocket and then gives it to the dogs. Ah, God, we love Barry Allen. They're a cute couple. At least Zack Snyder seemed to think so when he posted this a few years ago. Number 6. The anti-life equation. The anti-life equation is a mathematical formula said to allow those who know it to dominate the will of any sentient race. It's the main goal of Darkseid. He says it like 6 times in the movie, rapid fire. They really drive it home so you remember what the goal is for this 4-hour movie. Now, it came around in comics with Forever People issue 5 originally. It was actually believed to have disappeared along with the death of a guy named $1 Billion Bates because he took it to his grave in here. But Darkseid still continued to search for it. So Tassad made clones of $1 Billion Bates in order to access the equation, but Orion stepped in to stop these clones, and in doing so, he got the formula for himself, which is huge. So his goal was to use the equation for good and enforce goodwill among the population of Apokolips and Earth. But the equation itself was against free will and voluntary goodwill, so he gave it up. So to casual moviegoers, it may just seem like another space thing for the bad guy to go and get, but if we could see Orion and more history with the old gods, that would be really entertaining for a prequel. And it would even give the anti-life equation more life? Number 5. Martian Manhunter. When promotional material started to drop for the Justice League Whedonverse, the phrase "Unite the Seven" was widely spread. So we're down a superhero, right? Yeah, we're down. I mean, I always thought that at least, or people thought it was going to be Green Lantern or Martian Manhunter. And it's revealed now that Martian Manhunter was indeed supposed to be there all along. So Harry Lennox played a character named General Swanwick in Man of Steel and in Batman vs Superman. And he was supposed to play the same character in the Justice League, but he didn't make the cut. And a storyboard was revealed back in 2019 from Zack Snyder, revealing John Jones as Martha, aka Martha Manhunter. Now, at the end of the Snyder Cut, we see Martian Manhunter introduce himself to Bruce Wayne, which is just a cherry on top of a 4-hour cake. Number 4. New Nightmare. One of the most anticipated moments of the movie was the new Nightmare sequence. So we got to finally see dialogue between the Joker and Batman, and it was pretty deep as well. And the whole "we live in a society" line, that wasn't even in the final scene, so we were good. One of the most interesting parts of that scene was when the Joker pulled out his Joker card, the same Joker card we see on the side of Batman's weapon in Batman vs Superman's Nightmare scene. So we get to see what that card meant. It was a truce, a Bruce truce. So Cyborg is in the scene this time as well, alongside the Flash, in that same futuristic suit that we saw a glimpse of in Batman vs Superman. Now Mara is there representing as Queen of Atlantis, and Deathstroke is back rocking the mohawk. And I mean, I think it's fair to say we would watch a 3-hour Nightmare sequence at this point, right? Release every minute of footage, we'll just absorb it all. Number 3, Granny Goodness. A character we saw in the trailers but never really saw any more of in the actual Snyder Cut was Granny Goodness. So she's standing opposite to Tassad. She's clearly very close to Darkseid, but who exactly is this lady? She made her first debut in DC Comics with Mr. Miracle issue 2. She's a sadistic and cruel lieutenant to Darkseid, and she commands the female Furies with Big Barda. So she's clearly on the good side of Darkseid, and the name Granny Goodness can also be seen in the movie right before Barry saves Iris West in the truck accident. Yeah, the hot dog cart that gets hit right before says Granny Goodness right there on the side. Yummy, little taste of home. With Granny Goodness being in the movie, this could also be the key to introduce Scott Free, the only orphan that ever escaped the grasp of Granny Goodness, aka Mr. Miracle. So her presence could potentially set up Big Barda and Mr. Miracle's relationship. And it would also be interesting to see Mr. Miracle's origins in a flashback, being the son of High Father Isaiah, the ruler of New Genesis. So in order to stop a destructive war from going down on Apocalypse, High Father traded children with Darkseid, so they gave him Scott Free, and then they got Orion. I mean, I was upset when we traded Kawhi Leonard, but I couldn't imagine giving up Orion. Damn. Number 2, more Green Lantern. In the Snyder Cut, we see more Green Lantern action. We see an alien lantern that resembles Yulan Gur try and take down Darkseid, but he lost his hand and life in the process. But where did that ring float off to? Well, it's been revealed by Zack Snyder that he had originally shot that last scene with Martian Manhunter in England, and the dialogue was very similar, but the only difference was that Bruce was talking to a lantern, not Martian Manhunter. He was talking to John Stewart, who made his comic book debut in 1971 in Green Lantern Volume 2, Issue 87. He was an architect who was selected as Hal Jordan's backup after Guy Gardner was seriously injured. Now, the studio refused to let Snyder add any more into the movie, so he instead capped off the film with Martian Manhunter instead. Still good, but we want more because we're greedy. Number 1, more Darkseid. The movie does end on a cliffhanger. I knew this going in, and I was reminding myself while I was watching it for the first time, yet I still didn't see it coming. So Steppenwolf gets his head cut off, spoilers by the way, and Darkseid saw the whole thing with Desaad and Granny Goodness watching. So odds are he's probably not too happy with the team, and when he tells Desaad to prepare the Armada, he's probably not joking around. So Darkseid made his first debut in the world of comics back in 1970 in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, issue 134. He was born into the royal family of Apocalypse. He is a brutal dictator and he rules the planet. His main goal reaches further than the planet, of course. He actually wants to rule all of life in the universe. What a guy. So he had this brother named Drax, and they were sons of King Yuga Khan and Queen Hegra. Now Drax was the cool peaceful brother, and Euxis, aka Darkseid, was the jerk. So one day when Drax was trying to make a connection to the Omega realm and take his god name, Euxis came around and interrupted the whole thing, took the power for himself. So if we ever got to see more of Darkseid in either a prequel or a sequel, I'm sure it's gonna be a hot mess either way, and I'll pay $900 to watch it. I don't give a shit at this point. Kicking off the list at number 10, the Atom. There are new characters sprinkled throughout the 4-hour cut. One of them is Zhang Kai, who plays a character named Ryan Choi, aka the Atom. He made his first debut in Brave New World issue 1. He was Ray Palmer's successor, and he's actually the 4th person to take on the mantle of the Atom. Now, the scenes with Ryan were cut out from the theatrical version years back, but during the movie, Ryan reveals that he's the director of nanotechnology. In the comics, when he moves to the United States from Hong Kong, he takes up Ray Palmer's position at Ivy University. So Ray was the previous Atom in the comics, and Ryan and Ray had been in touch for a long time, and then Ray left him the size-changing belt, which Ryan intended on using exploring the microscopic world. So although powers weren't mentioned, there is an origin story in there to explore. And given the fact that this is specifically the 4th iteration of the Atom from the comics, we can hop in this story anytime. Given the fact that he's currently an employee of Star Labs, it makes it even easier to write him in the current Snyder timeline. So do it. And before we go on with our list, guys, if you haven't already, please go ahead and give this video a like, because those thumbs up help the channel out quite a lot, and while you're here, you might as well hit that little subscribe button at the same time, because it wouldn't hurt either. You guys are the best, thank you so much. Now back to the list. Number 9, Green Lantern. In the Snyder Cut, we also got to see not one, but 2 Green Lanterns. One of them we see and they're already deceased, sad, but it does resemble the Lantern Kilowog. Now the other one we see during the epic flashback with Darkseid is we see a lantern that looks pretty similar to Yulan Gur attack Darkseid, and in turn he gets his lantern hand cut off before receiving the final blow. So his ring floats off to find the next worthy bearer, but that's about all we see in terms of lanterns in the Snyder Cut. But originally Zack wanted more. Of course he wanted more, he knows what he's doing. So Snyder actually had plans at one point to bring back Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan, but it never fully came around to happening, which I'm okay with. You can stay in the Deadpool stuff. Don't come back over here. You don't want any part of this. But during an interview with Vanity Fair, Snyder revealed that he shot a scene with the Green Lantern, John Stewart. But Warner Brothers told him that they already had plans for Green Lantern and he couldn't shoot additional footage. So while we're due for a Green Lantern series at HBO Max, we could still hope for Snyder's story to be told to some degree with Kilowog and Yulan Gur. That character at the end was supposed to be Green Lantern, but instead it turned out to be Number 8. Martian Manhunter. Harry Lennix played General Swanwick in Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and he was supposed to play the character in Justice League, but he didn't make the cut. Now, a storyboard was revealed back in 2019 from Zack Snyder, revealing Jon Jones as Martha, aka Martha Manhunter. Now, with the release of the Snyder Cut, we finally get to see Martian Manhunter. He floats down and introduces himself to Bruce Wayne, but who exactly is this new alien superhero? Well, Jon Jones is a law enforcement officer from Mars who became a police detective after becoming marooned on Earth, and he made his first debut in comics back in 1955. Now, the fact that he's been in the Snyderverse since Man of Steel, I feel like we could for sure use a little history lesson on HBO Max even. Just give us a show with 6 episodes, like The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I would love to see how we got to Earth and became General Swanwick in the first place. Also, in his first issue, we meet Dr. Erdel, and when Jon Jones transforms, Dr. Erdel has a heart attack, so he's so shocked. So maybe this was the same origin story, and this compelled Jon Jones to stay hidden in the Snyderverse. Also, so tragic to be like, hey, check out my true form. You're dead. Sorry, not gonna show my true form ever again. Bye. Number 7. Justice League 2. I know we're still trying to absorb and take in the events of the Snyder Cut, but once upon a time we actually had 3 Justice Leagues in the works. So post Snyder Cut release, the director was interviewed when he said the sequel was supposed to show the fall of Earth. Justice League 2 would have mainly took place in the nightmare future, which is amazing because that means we've been getting teases at Justice League 2 since Batman vs Superman, back when Barry gave Bruce a warning from the future. So he says it's Lois Lane, she's the key. So for the planned sequel, it was planned that Lois would meet her fate tragically because Bruce failed to protect her. Now, Bruce was protecting her while Superman hashed it out with Darkseid, but Superman ended up getting the anti-life equation, Lois Lane bites the bullet, and now we have Superman on the evil side. That would have been Justice League 2. How amazing does that sound? So we're all freaking out about more Nightmare footage. Meanwhile, we could have had an entire Nightmare movie. I hope the hashtags work because we need the sequel ASAP. Number 6, a Flash sequel. Another amazing addition to the Snyder Cut was Kiersey Clemons. She made her debut as Iris West, and it's been announced since that she's on board to reprise her role in a future Flash movie. Now, we got a deleted scene with her back in 2017 when the first Justice League attempt came out, but then when Joss Whedon was called in to finish the movie, she wasn't asked to go back and film anything else. But now we finally get to see that scene with some more hot dogs and beautiful music. It actually made me laugh out loud, but it also gave me goosebumps. It was a perfect scene. It had every emotion in 1 2-minute mark. Bam. A newspaper reveals that this scene takes place in Central City, the hometown of Barry Allen from the comics. So already we have the playing field for a solo flick. It's already there. There we go. Barry also visits his father inside Iron Heights Penitentiary, and with the Flash's solo flick being moved now to November 2022 due to COVID, Billy Crudup has sadly dropped out of the speedster solo flick in order to film season 2 for the morning show, which landed him an Emmy. So fair, that's fair. You're gonna go do that, get an Emmy, cool, Mr. Cool Actor guy, whatever. So we won't be seeing him again, but instead we'll be getting Ron Livingston play Henry Allen in a sequel. Number 5, Flashpoint. So another huge question that has fans scratching their brains now that we've seen the Snyder Cut is, will there still be a Flashpoint movie? Will the Flash sequel be the Flashpoint movie? Who knows? Is Michael Keaton still on board? Outlook is looking a little hazy. So according to the 1992 Batman actor Michael Keaton, he said in a recent interview that he called them and said, I have to be honest with you, I can't look at anything right now. I'm so deep into this thing that I'm doing. Also, I'm prepping another thing I'm producing, and I'm getting ready to go down the road in the fall for something else that I've been in, and I feel responsible to that. So yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm not being cute or coy. So that's concerning. Maybe he might not be back for the Flashpoint movie, maybe he will. So this Flashpoint movie has been in the works on and off so many times, with the film going through 5 different screenwriters and 5 different directors. So who knows at this point if the Flashpoint movie will ever happen, or if it'll be the same as what we thought it was gonna be. If we were to get a Snyderverse Flashpoint though, it would make the most sense, and it would probably be the most successful even without Michael Keaton. Hear me out. So the opening credits on Batman vs Superman, we see Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Lauren Cohen play Bruce's parents. 2 amazing actors in such a small opening scene with no dialogue. Interesting. So the Flashpoint storyline is that Bruce Wayne got shot that night instead, and his father turned into a hardcore dark version of the Batman, and his mother turned into the Joker. Now these actors would have knocked that out of the park. Jeffrey Dean Morgan actually took to the internet and said, Michael Keaton swooped in and took my gig. Nah, I think that's super cool. Ever since Zack Snyder walked away from the project, my whole kind of bit in that world has walked away with him. However, there's always a chat going on. So we'll see. Hey, I mean, we've seen more Snyderverse since, so hopefully if Keaton does step away, the original plans do come back and we get an even better Flashpoint movie than we kind of thought we were going to get after the already announced Flashpoint movie. I'm confused too. Number 4, Justice League 3. That's right, if your mind was blown when I talked about the planned Justice League sequel taking place mainly in the Nightmare timeline, well, there was once a third movie planned as well. It was supposed to take place after the Flash had run back the timeline following Superman going dark. So Batman would have to sacrifice his life and Superman then becomes the leader of the Justice League. Zack Snyder planned on Superman having an even bigger arc than he already does. He figured if anybody can go all the way with Superman, Henry Cavill was the guy to do it. I agree, I mean fans have been screaming for a Man of Steel sequel, so hearing what we almost got makes us want it even more. It's like, hey, you almost got something even better, but no. No, I don't like money, so no, get out of here. After Justice League 3, it would have been 20 years in the future, and it's been confirmed that Lois was indeed pregnant in the Snyder Cut. So Superman and Lois' son was planning on being Bruce Kent, aka the new Batman to step up. On the anniversary of Batman's death in the Snyderverse, they would have taken young Bruce Kent down to the Batcave and say your Uncle Bruce would have been very proud that you did this. So that sounds like an amazing movie, but maybe we'll see it when I'm 76, when the hashtags work. I don't know. Number 3. Aquaman 2. So during the Nightmare sequence, we see a number of additional characters, one of them being Mera. Only this time around, she's representing as Queen of Atlantis. So with the current release date for the Aquaman sequel falling on December 2022, we're looking forward to seeing Super Life Under the Sea continue. Now, if we were to see a Snyder version of these characters, we could see Mera as the Queen of Atlantis a little longer than we did in the Nightmare sequence. Now her hair is noticeably longer in this sequence and she's rocking Aquaman's trident. So while this may have been explained in the cancelled Justice League 2 Nightmare sequel, it would still be a time to see how life below carries on while No Man's Land was nothing but a dusty wasteland up above. I would have loved to see that. It's like part 1, part 2, part 3, and then part 4, Superman goes good. Yeah, done. Number 2, Batman solo flick. Okay, so I'm very excited for the new Batman movie. Robert Pattinson looks great. Paul Dano is playing the Riddler. He's such a good actor, and I have so much faith in Matt Reeves. It's gonna probably be at least good. But now after we saw Batman and Deathstroke in the same Nightmare sequence, fans are hoping that we get a little more in that field as well. Please, because Joe Manganiello has been attached to the role for years, the poor guy, okay. It went from a Batman movie with Ben Affleck being canceled, then Deathstroke had an origin film that was canceled, so that's 6 months of work just gone down the drain, and then they altered his post-credit scene in the first Justice League that alluded to a sequel that was also canceled, and then there was a version of the Suicide Squad 2 that got canceled as well. Damn. Then there were talks of a Deathstroke Deadshot movie, which canceled. Also canceled. I mean, if we could get maybe like, I don't know, one of these projects to work, that would be great. That Ben Affleck movie would have been so good, but I mean, oh well, you can't complain too much. Just a little, you know, you can complain a little bit. But when it comes to Joe Manganiello, like, dude, I would sue them. I would sue them or go in dressed up as Deathstroke with the mohawk and be like, where's my millions of dollars? Because like, that's a lot of work. Number 1, Granny Goodness and Desaad origins. In the Snyder Cut, we see Desaad a little bit. He talks to Steppenwolf every now and then, checking in on how the whole, you know, planet ruling is going. But then there's another character standing opposite to him when the big 3 finally come face to face with the Justice League. There's Darkseid, Desaad, and who is this other person? Who is she? Who is she? Her name is Granny Goodness. She made her first comic book debut in DC Comics with Mr. Miracle issue 2, and she's a sadistic and cruel lieutenant to Darkseid, and she commands the female Furies with Big Barda. So she's kind of a big deal, but she had no lines, sadly. Weirdly. It would be interesting to see Mr. Miracle's origins in a flashback while we explore more of these characters. Like Mr. Miracle, for example, that would be an amazing origin story with the new gods. See, Mr. Miracle was the son of the High Father Isaiah, the ruler of New Genesis. And in order to stop a destructive war from going down on Apocalypse, High Father traded children with Darkseid. So we gave him scot-free, the only orphan to escape the grasp of Granny Goodness, and then in turn, they got Orion, Darkseid's second son. What a trade. Honestly, an HBO Max series about Granny Goodness could work. Just cast Gwendolyn Christie and then make it an origin story. It would slap, because she is so badass. I loved her in Game of Thrones. Well guys, there you have it. Look, never say never when it comes to getting these Snyderverse movies back on track. I mean, Ezra Miller was cast back in 2014, and then finally in 2021 we get to see him run back in time in order to save the Justice League from Darkseid. I mean, that sentence alone just gives me enough hope.
Number 10. Grail. Grail is the daughter of Darkseid and is definitely someone I'd love to see make an appearance in the darker toned world of the Snyderverse. Grail is believed to be destined to cause massive destruction in the universe, and just in terms of what she is physically and magically capable of, she seems to live up to that potential, at least on paper. While we know Darkseid and his generals were teased, it's also possible that in the fight against Darkseid we could have been introduced to his daughter Grail. Grail was created by Jeff Johns and Jason Fabok and made her first appearance in the 2011 Justice League series in issue number 40, part of the New 52. Grail first appeared there in 2015, so she's relatively new in the comics, but also that might make her a great pick for the DCEU, and possibly the Snyderverse were it to continue. Number 9. Gorilla Grodd. Gorilla Grodd is an iconic and bizarre Flash villain, but I think Snyder could have been the one to pull this character off. Also, think of the pun wars that could happen between him and Snyderverse Flash. Endless pun wars. Gorilla Grodd is basically a genius level intellect possessing gorilla with psionic powers who also happens to sometimes have super speed powers as well. Gorilla Grodd is definitely an odd pick, but I also think that's what makes him great for the Snyderverse. I also feel like Snyder might even be able to bring some sense of humanity and relatability to Gorilla Grodd, allowing him to become more than just a two-dimensional villain on the big screen. Either way, the fights I'm sure between Flash and Grodd would both be epic and comical. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear us talk more Snyderverse, I know there are many Snyder stands out there, I see ya, then let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Mercy Graves. This might be a kind of weird pick considering that Mercy Graves is considered to be a smaller character overall, but I kinda want to see her in the Snyderverse. Mercy Graves made her first appearance in the comics in 2014 in Justice League, the series that started in 2011 with the New 52, technically the second volume of Justice League. She appeared in issue 31 and was created by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, so it's kind of a no-brainer perhaps that I would love her. Mercy is Lex's personal assistant and bodyguard. She's ruthless, deadly, smart, and a complete badass, which is obviously why I would love to see Zack Snyder's take on her in the DCEU, as she aids Lex Luthor in his devious plots. At least that's what I imagine would happen. Number 7. Granny Goodness. We only got a sneak peek look at Granny Goodness in the Snyder Cut of Justice League, and it wasn't even an actor playing her, it was simply an artist's aunt whose likeness was basically used for a digital model. I personally would have loved to see what this character was like in the Snyderverse and to see her in action. We also got a deep look after that version came out of like her character design, and I think it looks awesome. If we do ever get to pick up from where we left off with the Snyderverse, then odds are good that we will get to see some version of Granny Goodness within it. However, the odds of that continuing are sadly feeling pretty slim at the moment. Maybe the events of the Flash film will make it possible for us to continue though, who knows. For those who are unfamiliar with Granny Goodness, she is one of Darkseid's generals, part of Darkseid's elite, and is generally the leader of Darkseid's female Furies, some of his most fearsome warriors. Number 6. Parallax. Oddly enough, I'd really be interested to see what someone like Zack Snyder would do with a strange character like Parallax. I know the first time around in the cinematic realm, that character was kind of a bit of a mess. Yes, I'm talking about the Green Lantern 2011 film, but that doesn't mean that Parallax couldn't be amazing, if the character was simply done right. We know that Snyder would have likely been inching his way closer to the Green Lanterns, and eventually would have them show up as part of his vision for the DCEU, if his version of the DCEU were permitted to continue on. A Green Lantern was more prominently featured in the Snyder Cut of Justice League during the ancient fight against Darkseid, and Snyder originally had wanted Green Lantern John Stewart to be the one who confronts Batman at the end of the film instead of Martian Manhunter, but Warner Brothers basically said no, because they already had plans for both Hal Jordan and John Stewart in the works. So Parallax could very well be another great villain alongside mega threats like Darkseid that we would have seen in the future eventually, and that I personally would like to see. Number 5. Joker. We've seen Joker show up in the Snyderverse and learn that Zack Snyder had his own plans for Batman and his arch nemesis, the Joker. Jared Leto's Joker made his appearance in Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League at the very end when we got to glimpse into the potential dark future that Bruce Wayne had premonitions about via his dreams. For many fans, this was a far different take on the Joker in comparison to what we saw of Jared Leto's Joker in the Suicide Squad, and many people actually preferred this version to the previous one. I, however, was not really a massive fan of either of them, to be honest, but I can see the appeal of the Joker here, and I definitely would at least be interested to see what Zack Snyder had planned for these two, as I found Batfleck and the Joker's dynamic here to be very interesting. And to be honest, I do actually still find Jared Leto's Joker from the Suicide Squad to be interesting. Neither of these are really my bag, you know what I mean? Hopefully some of this version of the Joker could potentially carry on, and perhaps we'll get to see more into these dark apocalyptic versions of the characters in the Flash film. Because who knows where we're going through time. We're definitely going somewhere though, I think. Alternate realities, gonna travel, it's gonna be nuts. Number 4, Cersei. When it comes to Wonder Woman's villains, we've got a few good ones, but I think we could get something really creepy, dark, and intense going for her rogues gallery within the Snyderverse. I would love to see Cersei take to the stage in these films, acting as a main antagonist for Diana and also potentially for multiple heroes, perhaps even the whole League. Cersei has also caused trouble for Batman and has tangled with Satana before in the DC animated universe, so who's to say we couldn't see her take on more than just Wonder Woman. Either way, I think she would be a cool addition to the Snyderverse. I also feel like Cersei, perhaps in a more horror genre take on Wonder Woman, could be excellent. And with how dark the Snyderverse is, maybe we could throw in some element of the horror genre. To be honest, it kinda sounds like I want a Justice League Dark movie with this point, but maybe that is what I want. Cersei is typically known for her ability to transform people into animals or animal hybrids, but that isn't all she does. She is a powerful, often immortal witch whose evil ways often lead her into conflicts with Wonder Woman and the Amazons of Themyscira in general. Number 3, Grid. Grid is a villain who I think would be really interesting to see in the Snyderverse, especially considering how much Cyborg got cut from that original theatrical release of the Justice League film. Wow, he got cut a lot. In the Snyder Cut, Cyborg was featured much more prominently, explored more deeply as a character, and just he did a lot more stuff. And I don't know about you, but I'd really love to see Ray Fisher's Cyborg in his own film taking on his own villain, if we could ever get Ray Fisher back as Cyborg. In this case, I think Grid would be a really cool pick. Fans of the Doom Patrol series may know Grid as the AI system that exists within the cybernetic parts of Jovian Wade's Cyborg. However, in the comics, Grid was actually a villain, a virus with sinister intentions who basically worked with the crime syndicate, aiming to destroy and conquer Vic Stone. Number 2, Deathstroke. Deathstroke did make a brief appearance at the end of Justice League, and then a different brief appearance that was a little longer at least at the end of the Snyder Cut, where that scene featuring him goes quite a bit differently. We didn't really get to see fully though what Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke was like, and I for one would love to see more of what Snyder had planned for this character. I love Joe Manganiello and I love Deathstroke, and I was excited to see him hunt down and attempt to settle what seemed to be a very personal score with Batman, at least after I saw the Snyder Cut. Because in the original one he basically just shows up and then Lex is like, let's make a league of our own. Okay, definitely like the Snyder Cut take on that whole scene better. Number 1, Brainiac. Brainiac is another villain I would love to have had shown up in the Snyderverse, and I think Man of Steel fans would agree that Brainiac would make an awesome villain for the DCEU Superman played by Henry Cavill, should we get a chance to continue his story. I want to see where Snyder would take Supes when it comes to his approach on Brainiac. Brainiac is a classic Superman villain whose first iteration appeared in Action Comics issue 242 in the 1950s. Since then, we have seen many different versions of Brainiac come and go, with the most recent iteration sharing the name of his original version, Vril Dox. Brainiac was actually the name of that character that was given to him on Krypton. It's like each world actually has had different names for this character, for Vril Dox. Often, Brainiac is the one responsible for capturing the city of Kandor, the former capital city of Krypton, keeping it as a miniature in a bottle. Initially, Brainiac bottled cities so that he might increase his own knowledge and his intellect. After Kandor was bottled, by the way, and taken by Brainiac in the original continuity, now known as the Reality of Earth 1, but at the time it was the main, Kryptonopolis became the new capital city of the planet, which is a little weird unless Kryptonopolis was renamed because it was now the capital. I just mean, if you have a city named Kryptonopolis, wouldn't you think it would be the name for your capital city? Like, Why would you even have that name unless it was the capital city? It's just so weird. I guess Kandor had like really good stuff that they made, or it was really popular, or the government was there. I don't know. I don't know enough about Kryptonian life and what the planet was like. Gonna have to read into that more.